It's Mona Das. Thank you so much for joining us for another amazing episode of Badass Women Doing Kick-Ass Shit. I am so excited to introduce you to our next guest, Representative Lorena Austin. Thank you for being here. It's wonderful to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I got to meet you recently and it was super great. We connected really easily, but yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
It's so great. So thank you so much for saying yes. We're so excited to support you and your campaign and the great work you're doing. So I'd love to kick it off with just a few, tell us a little bit about yourself. We know that your district in Arizona is critical to not only keeping Arizona blue, keeping your district blue, but also the pathway for VP Harris to get elected. So tell us a little bit about you and why your race is so important.
Yeah, so again, I'm State Representative Lorena Austin. I have the honor and privilege of serving Legislative District Number 9, which is West Mesa and Tempe. If you're familiar with Arizona, it's about 25 minutes southeast of Phoenix, depending on how fast you drive. It's been such a wild ride coming into this space and place. So I'm a fifth generation Arizonan, but my family has lived in my district for over 100 years. So we have strong roots in this community. And I come from, a family of really working class, hard workers on both sides of my family. You can find farm workers. My grandmother and grandparents were farm workers. My mother's side is from California, and my father's side is from here in Arizona. And so that's where we have the deep roots here. I have a great great grandfather who was a sheriff here in Pinal County. And then my nana and tata here in Mesa had a grocery store. And so they owned this grocery store for decades. And it was in the segregated part, though, of Mesa at the time, Washington Escobedo neighborhood. So that's where my family's from. My father was born there in this neighborhood. And the thing I like to convey to people or just explain is that my father's alive. My father is 73 years old and he was born in a segregated neighborhood. And I think it's really important to understand that piece of our history for context, not to make anyone feel bad or ashamed, but to talk about, how things are the way they are based upon this historical context and policies that have shaped spaces and places. And so my dad was born in Mesa and he couldn't even swim in his own swimming pool, the local swimming pool, because he was Mexican. He was brown. So that really impacted, his life. But he grew up here in Mesa and he was able to go to college in California. And then he attended that, really conservative college, Berkeley Law School. And he was able to graduate from there, where you could graduate for $300 a semester, which is wild in terms of how much inexpensive it is today. You can't do that anymore. But that's where he met my mom after he went to college there, and she was working there at the Santa Clara County. But they were both independently involved in the Chicano movement, which a lot of people might know. Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez, the United Farm Workers Union in Vietnam was happening at the time as well. And so they were independently active. And then they met and came back to here to Arizona, where I'm from. And so I was born here in Mesa. And so my mom is a former educator teacher. My dad's a civil rights attorney. So it's no surprise, that I maybe am here serving my community because that's what they taught me to do. And so, also life is complicated. Come from, a background of divorced parents. And so for complicated reasons too, I ended up living with one of my parents, and we experienced, a lot of difficulties. And so that included, not having all the money that we needed at one time, ended up in Section 8 housing. And so I think that's really impactful for me as well, because it really allows me to relate to people that I serve, because we're experiencing so many things that I might have experienced, and I can understand how we need to navigate and push forward community-oriented policies. And so that's kind of some of my background growing up. After high school, I was living in California with my mom. I moved back to Arizona to be close to my dad, and I tried to go to Mesa Community College, and I became a 5-time college dropout. Math was really rough for me. I had to take math, retake it every year in high school, and I just thought that was the indicator of intelligence or success. And so when I didn't do well, I just, kind of freaked out and left. And so I ended up moving to St. Louis in 2011 to be near my brother, who had taken a job over there. He's starting his family. And that's where I really got to become myself, my authentic self. I came out, identify as non-binary and queer, and I had an amazing community in St. Louis. But I was working, restaurant jobs. I've been a server most of my, young adult life. And that's how I was making money, and it was great, and had a great, friend group. But I could tell that, I could only go so far, in that
Right.
workspace. And then in 2014, though, this was the life shattering, changing moment for me. Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson, Missouri by a police officer. And
Mm,
that was my life changing moment, because I think at that time I grew up in a decade of public school system where they taught us that like MLK marched and we're good, right? Things aren't perfect, but in terms of, you know, uh, systemic oppression or racial oppression, like we're so much better than we were.
right.
So that was the moment where I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know how to constructively convey what I'm feeling, but I know something's wrong. And that really ignited the Black Lives Matter movement. Again, it had already been established,
Yeah,
prior, but the social movements that we're seeing today stem from Ferguson, Missouri. And obviously,
absolutely.
we've had George Floyd since then, unfortunately, and Sandra Bland and other people. But that's really where it started for us, I think, in this current generation. And so I came back to Arizona. I knew that I had to do something. And so I came home. I was actually already coming home, and I went to an event again at the college that I dropped out of 5 times before, Mesa Community College. A director of student life and leadership saw me there. I'd kind of spoken up my experience because I was down there at the protest. I saw tanks in the street, like martial law came to my neighborhood. Like I was there, could
Right.
feel the energy. And so came back to Mesa Community College. Someone saw me speak, asked me to work for them, was trying to offer me a job, and then realized that I didn't have a degree. And so it takes one person to change your life sometimes.
Yeah.
And they dragged me to the enrollment center at Mesa Community College, a college I'd already tried to go to, and they made me take a placement test. And then they gave me a job on campus. And that changed my life, because
Oh,
now I have access to all the resources I didn't have before.
right.
I took a sociology class, and that another changed my life moment. I changed my major to sociology. I finally recognized like that I wanted to understand how people um,
Right.
came to be based on the myriad of intersectionalities of ourselves, right? So whether that's socioeconomic status, two parent, one parent household, religion, all these things. I changed my major, sociology, got really involved on campus, became secretary of public policy for my student government there, and then became student body president in 2017. And so
Yeah.
then all these years later, right, 10 years removed from college, after high school, I graduated in 2018 as student body president. I was an honor student. I did all the things. And so then I got a full ride scholarship to Arizona State University. And
Wow.
there I studied immigration policy and economy from the School of Transborder Studies, did a lot of things, worked in the public, private, nonprofit sectors, and came out, with the Dean's Medal, top of my class, 4.1, all the things.
Amazing.
Congressman Ed Pastor Scholar, and then May 2020, or 2020 was when I was supposed to graduate. It was COVID.
Yep.
So I was that first class, graduating class of COVID.
Yeah.
And we all know what happened, but for me, that meant going to work just like my family taught. So I started volunteering at the food banks immediately. I was the only person that spoke Spanish when we were trying to intake people to get them the right amount of food. And that was really critical because we wanted to make sure food got to everyone that needed it.
Yep.
Started doing donation drives with the local restaurant here called Republica Empanada, who are my family friends. And we ourselves as a community came together and bust up ourselves PPE, water, food, supplies. And that's the community that I come from, right? And so these were 14-hour days. We would have to get up there and get out by curfew, right? So it was, such a massive effort, but it was necessary. And
Yeah.
so things were starting to open up in 2022, and I decided I was going to go to law school. And I had already applied. I'd early applied to Stanford. Stanford rejected me, and I found my letter the other day. I'm going to frame it, send it back one day. I don't know if they missed out on, but it's okay because a friend called me who I'd gone to college with, and I was studying for my LSATs, and she said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I said, "No, I'm going to law school." And she said, "No, you should run for office." And I said, "Hell no." Like, do not mess with me right now. I finally like have my educational pathway right. It taken me a long time, but I got there, which is okay. That was my journey. And so she called me like 5 more times and said, "Lorena, a brand new district was created in 22 with the census, and it's literally West Mesa, where you're from.
Mm-hmm.
No one from Mesa is running. People are moving from crowded primaries and other cities to have an
Wow.
easier, because these seats were brand new, they were open, and there were
Right.
no incumbents." And so when she said that, that's when I I decided that I guess I would forfeit going to law school. I pulled all my applications. I didn't take my final LSAT, and I had to get a lot of signatures in 1 month. So I filed late. They were doing April. I filed at like March 1st. So community came together. My team, I had to find people to help me do
Yeah.
this, and we did. We ended up getting the most signatures in the whole district actually in a month. Um,
Wow, that's amazing. And what
yeah,
like you literally just did a quick, like a really hard pivot. That's amazing.
a
From law
month.
school to lawmaker. I love that. That should
Yeah,
be the
yeah.
title of your book.
Surprise to me. Trust. No
Yeah.
one's
Yeah.
surprised. So that happened, and then we just worked. We worked our butts off, and it happens to be the most competitive district numbers wise in the entire state of Arizona. It's
Okay.
less percentage point between Republicans and Democrats. So we have an independent base, obviously, and so we just went knocking door to door. And my district is, historically, if you know about Arizona, SB 1070, Show Me Your Papers law. That senator who created that law was the former legislator for this district.
Wow.
So people laughed. I mean, the majority of the Republicans who had really strong armed this district before just didn't think I would win.
Right.
There's no way someone who looks like you, who's brown, queer,
Yeah.
no way, not here. Because historically that is not the status quo.
Yeah.
But we did what we had to do, and we went to work, and we knocked doors, and we won in 2022, and I became unknowingly I became the first Chicane non-binary legislator in the entire country ever elected.
Yes. That's amazing. Oh my God. Congratulations. I love it. I was thinking that actually when you were mentioning it, I was like, I wonder if they
Yeah,
are, because I really think that's, yeah, obviously you figured it out, but yeah, that's amazing. What a
that's
cool, what's that?
I said someone had to tell me. I had no idea because that's not why I ran, right? I had
Right,
no
of
idea.
course. Yeah, yeah.
And so definitely the first non-binary legislator ever in the country.
Amazing.
No,
Congratulations.
in the state, but first Chicane non-binary in the country, but first in the state for sure.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, so since 2022, I've been a state legislator. It's the wildest thing I could ever imagine, but
I
have
know.
managed to do some good things. I've taken kind of this mantle of being the LGBTQ plus advocate. Again, it wasn't something that I really thought would happen,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it just naturally happened. And so we had things like the pronoun bill come through these past 2 years. We've had really anti-LGBTQ legislation. I've really been able to be a champion for that because now
Yep.
for the first time, they want to make these laws, but now someone who, has directly lived, this life and can speak directly to your
Yep.
policy is sitting in the same room as them. And
That's
that
right.
hadn't happened before. So
Ever. And that's
ever.
what I always talk about that. Like when I ran on a platform of like, if you are not on the menu, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? And there's folks like us that have been on the menu for far too long. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden they can't other you because you are there, right? They
Yes.
can't say, well, this community, that community, this person, that person, this type of person. It's like literally you're sitting there at the same table. And there's such power in that. And I love that. And I love that, especially in Arizona. I think that's so powerful and so cool. I think, yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
That is something to be really exciting and proud of. And here's the thing, and this is what I tell people all the time. You don't know who you're inspiring. You have no idea. You're going to be inspiring someone that you've never met before that's going to look at you and be like, wow, if they can do it, I can do it. And I think
Yeah.
that's really,
Oh,
really, really powerful.
yeah. Thank you. It's been,
So,
yeah, I've had people from all over the state, students ask me to come talk to them. I will, because that's important that they see
yep.
representation. I was able to host the first ever LGBTQ plus Pride Day at the Capitol. There's never been an official Pride Day at
Wow.
the Capitol, and that's the difference, right?
Yep.
That's what we've been trying to, and it's not that I want us to be treated differently. We just want to be recognized and also left alone. But it's also I get to normalize what a queer person looks like, especially to people who have these wild assumptions.
Right. Right.
And I think they thought I'd have rainbows shooting out of my fingertips or something.
Rainbows and unicorns, here they come.
You, but I think they wanted me to be in their face. They wanted me to be this thing that
Yeah.
try to induce so much fear about, right? And that they know nothing about our community though, and they
Yeah.
want to hear, because they're scared and ignorant, or for whatever reason. And so it's been, I think, just really, I'm really honored that I've been able to do that. It's hard, but I'm really happy that I'm able to be there and
Well,
support her.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful for you because standing up and just being there, like you said, at the table, and you can't be othered, and your communities can't be othered while you're sitting there at the table because they can see you and hear you. And I talk about this a lot. Like I experienced the other side of the aisle very differently in the cafeteria where we ate in the dining room
Mm,
versus like being on the floor, right? Like,
yes.
I feel like the, you can actually have a conversation and they're people and they have people in their families that look like us or that are like us. And so I feel like there's that level of intimacy that you can have that is very different than what happens on the floor where
Yeah.
everyone's trying to get their points across and their sound bites for their
Yeah.
next ad or whatever, right? Like they're very different people that show up. And I always try to remember that you can always have a conversation with someone, even if it doesn't feel like anything you talk about is the same. Like you feel like you're completely polar opposites. And that's what I found being in the legislature. And, I'd love to hear, because where I was in Washington, obviously we were in the majority. So what is it like being in the minority? And also, would you talk about how close it is? I think people outside of Arizona have no idea how actual close it is in Arizona to have a trifecta. Or I guess you want to have a trifecta, but like to at
Yeah.
least have your legislature turn blue.
Yeah, for almost 60 years, Republicans have been in the majority here in the state of Arizona. And so, it's really important to recognize that. And
Yep.
especially with people who are not satisfied with the state of affairs here in the state, well, there's a reason for that. There's been one majority
Yep.
party. And so, right now in the state of Arizona, we are one of the swing battleground states, not just for the state legislature, but for the federal races,
That's right.
presidential. Biden only won by about approximately 10,000 votes here, in the state of Arizona. But at the state level legislature, we are 16 Republicans to 14 Democrats in the House, and 31 Republicans to 29 Democrats. I'm sorry, 16 to 14 in the Senate. I
Yeah.
apologize.
Yeah.
And then 31 to 29 in the House. So in each chamber, there are three flipple chambers in the country right now. Two of
Yeah.
those are in Arizona.
Yep. Yep.
Senate and so we are down by one seat in each chamber from tying and two from flipping to
Yeah.
have a trifecta. But even if we tied, that would be a trifecta, because we have a Democratic governor.
That's right.
Um,
That's
and
right.
so everything's on the line. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that, Democrats have been putting this work in for decades to be where we are.
Yep.
I mean, 10 years ago, no one would ever have thought, that we would be in this position, and we are. So it's so imperative. It's races like mine, right? Less than a percentage point. That could be the tipping point, and we have major issues, especially whatever happens with the federal. We've seen the Supreme Court just continue to roll back,
Correct.
protections at the federal level.
Yeah.
So that's where the state legislatures are now at the front of this, battlegrounds. So it's extremely important that we're paying attention to our state legislature. And our race is so close that, the concern is like we pick up a few seats in another district but lose ours, and then we lose majority, or the chance of
Right.
that.
Oh, I was just going to ask about your seatmates. Are your seatmates
Yeah.
Democrats or Republicans?
All Democrats. So we
All
swept the district.
Democrats.
I have Representative Seth Blattman serving with me in the House, and then Senator Ebba Birch. And so, what's cool about us three, though, is we are really unique and we are very broad in our expertise. So, I'm the community activist educator. Representative Blattman, he is a small business owner. So, he's really good about economy, and he was able to secure a micro loans business program here for the state. For our small businesses to obtain. And then Senator Birch is a healthcare provider. She's a nurse practitioner. And she was able to secure some money for our firefighters. And then as an educator, I was able to secure $20 million for our Arizona Promise program, which is for our 3 universities to help students subsidize tuition because it's so expensive.
Yeah.
So between the 3 of us, we got most of the areas covered. So if they have questions, we're a really good slate here in this district. And it's a very working class district as well. And so we need to make sure that we continue to have, working class people represent us.
And is the Senate seat up right now too?
Yeah, they're all up. Yeah, we're all together
They're all
running.
up.
We're
Okay.
running all together this November, every 2 years. So we
Oh,
don't
your
get
Senate
to.
seats are only for 2 years?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So you're all
So are
running every.
our so are our weirdly our congressional House seats are also 2 years,
Right,
which is
right, right,
interesting.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
We're
it's a
all
lot. It's a lot.
but not yeah.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, and that's, that's one of the reasons, obviously, we love you and think you're amazing, but one of the reasons that we're supporting you specifically is because you have this really clear path for winning. And it's imperative that we keep your seat, not only to keep your seat blue and to keep the district blue, but also, like we mentioned before, it's a direct path to Arizona. It's a direct path to keeping Arizona blue. It's a direct path to landing that trifecta in Arizona and also helping VP Kamala Harris get elected too. And that's so exciting for so many reasons. I did not realize how close Arizona was until I started looking into it. It was like, wow, this is really so incredibly important to make sure that we support the legislative candidates, because this could be a game changer, not only for Arizona, but for the nation. So, yay,
100%.
we're so excited to support you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing. We have, like I said, it's taken us 60 years to get
Yeah.
here. We're right there. It's so close.
Yeah, to get this close. Yeah, right. And so do you know, like, if it is 50-50, who's the tiebreaker?
For a specific race
Yeah,
or
no,
just,
no. So like if your legislature is 50-50, like in ours, our lieutenant governor was the tiebreaker. So it was really important that our lieutenant governor was also a Democrat.
oh,
Yeah, in voting, do you know who's the tiebreaker?
we don't have a tiebreaker here. So, well, I mean, it would just depend on what the makeup looks like, next year.
Yeah,
But we
I'm
don't
just
have
wondering, if only one seat flips in each chamber and it's 50-50, then is there a tiebreaker for bills? Do you know?
it would just depend on the person who wants to be the tiebreaker. No, we don't have a specific. That's why it would be really interesting too, because right
Yeah,
now, the way it's set up, if you're the majority, you get to pick all the chairs of the committees,
that's right.
stack them in whatever favor. So I think people don't recognize too. I get why people are disenfranchised with politics or just unmotivated by it, because they
Yeah,
might elect someone like me, right? And I said I want to do all these things. I don't make promises. I said I'm going to try, because I can't if we don't have a majority. So
that's right.
I dropped a ton of bills last session. I dropped bills on housing, worker protections, and not one got a hearing. I also dropped a bill for the first ever LGBTQ license plate here in the state. Arizona loves license plates. And out of all the other license plates, there were a good number of them. Mine was the only one to not get a hearing. So that's an example. Not because it wasn't a good bill, it goes towards student scholarships, but it's a political,
Right.
it's a political fight right now. Our existence, queer
That's
existence,
right.
is
That's right.
always under attack. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's critically important, because if we tie, at the very least, we could have split committee chairs. So we would actually have opportunities for our bills to be heard for the first time. So
Right.
when you talk
For the
about like a
first time
split
in
vote,
60 years. Right.
yeah. So
That's
the
really
split vote
powerful.
would just, who's willing to work across the aisle. And I think it will change a lot, because people are going to want to get their bills heard, because there's
Yeah.
no way around it otherwise. So
Yeah.
it will just have to. It forces bipartisanship at that point.
Well, and isn't there a path in Arizona to actually flip 2 seats in the Senate and 2 seats in the House? Like there's a clear path, right? And obviously
Yeah,
your
there is.
district is one
So
of them to keep.
yeah, the key to keeping that dream alive. Yeah, the Senate has a pathway. I mean, there are pathways in both chambers, but again, it's going to depend on the closest races.
Yeah.
That we've seen. I mean, our attorney general in 22 only won by 236 votes, I believe,
In a
and that was a
statewide race. Wow.
statewide race. And so that's how swing Arizona is.
Right. Right.
We're not talking about, hundreds of thousands of votes. We're talking about 10,000 votes for a presidential race,
Right.
and then hundreds of votes for a state race.
Right.
Race could literally come down to less than 100 votes.
Yeah.
And I hope it doesn't, but that's a reality for us here in swing
Right.
Arizona.
Well, and this
you
is
just
why
don't.
it's so important to get those voter drives out, and the work that you all are doing running for the state legislative races and, the city councils and the school boards. It's like, those are where the community can really meet you and understand why it's important to not only register to vote, but actually vote. And I will say, I had to say, I was so excited to see Taylor Swift come out and support Kamala Harris the other night, because we know that the 18 to 35-year-old demographic does not vote. If that's what it takes for Taylor Swift to come out and say, please register to vote, here's the link, and it actually happens and folks actually vote, that could swing many of your elections in Arizona. We know that the margin is just razor thin.
If young people knew their collective power and really utilized it,
Yep.
things would change. But I remember being a young person and having other priorities. I've always voted, but as it to think as intensely as I do now about and understanding the impact of these policies. I tell young people all the time, I don't want to gatekeep. I don't want to be in this position forever. But also, you need to understand that we're making policy that's going to affect your future, your job opportunities, your ability to have a family, where you want to live. I mean, all of these things. But also too, the legislature in Arizona, I mean, it gatekeeps in the way of money. So we only make as legislators $24,000 a year.
Yeah.
And people will say, well, why don't we have good candidates? I'm like, no, we have amazing candidates, but people cannot afford to make $24,000 a year.
No.
I mean, I've had to forfeit my job. I've forfeited retirement savings for, almost 3 years now. I live, I don't even live in an apartment. I have to live in a room in an office because I don't make enough. I have a hot plate and I have to take my laundry to the laundromat. It's a sacrifice, but if you're not rich or retired, you can't be a legislator.
Yeah.
Simply put. And that's not fair. That's not equitable. In this case, you do get what you pay for. Not to say that everyone would be perfect, but you'd have a much better opportunity of having someone who actually reflects the community that they represent.
That's right.
I'm grateful that I'm able to do this at this age. It's the honor of a lifetime, but I can't stay here forever. It's financially impossible. Even if people wanted me to stay, I feel like I'm doing good work, but it doesn't pay enough. And that's another big hurdle.
And I'll tell you, that's
people.
the reason I left the legislature, and we get paid twice as much as you do. And it's like, I couldn't live in Seattle, outside of Seattle, and stay a legislator. It just wasn't feasible for me. And I tell people all the time exactly what you're saying. It's like, this is why the laws are the way they are. It's because the only people that can afford to stay are people that are wealthy or have a spouse that can afford it. And so therefore you're getting laws and lawmakers that might not know people that are like you or in your situation. And so they're legislating based on what they know. And what they know is very limited. If all of their friends and family and everyone that's in their trusted circle is like them, then they can't think outside of that.
Well, and they're also so detached and removed from reality for some of the people we serve. So I sit on commerce and appropriations, and a housing bill came forward, and it was about allowing developers to develop, housing on smaller plots of land. Because I'm sorry, not everyone needs a multifamily, house or, a 2-story, 6-bedroom house. People are looking for simply, a smaller home. So we can make lot size a little smaller. We had, Republican legislators on the other side saying, oh, well, they'll just build tree houses or they'll build X, Y, and Z. And I was like, how ignorant are you? And also how rude and just you have no concept of what people are facing. People want a roof over their head, and they're not going to make tree houses. I don't understand, and I had to really break it down and be like, do you understand what you're saying? You're demeaning humans. You're demeaning people who simply will live in a smaller house. Do you believe, and because you don't want it in your neighborhood, do you think people who live in smaller houses than you are less neighborly or less worthy of a home, or you can't get along with them? So they weren't even comprehending what we're asking. People are literally asking to have a couple thousand, 100 square foot, whatever, hundreds home. It's not, and they shouldn't have to, first of all, but we're trying to bring forward solutions in a rapid pace so we can get people off the streets. We have seniors with fixed incomes. We have people who are working multiple jobs and they still can't afford rent. And that's criminal.
Yes.
We have landlords raising rental prices by 40% and gouging people. So this issue is so much more complex, but also there's things we could do. So it is just really, infuriating, like what you said, when you have people that literally can't understand the people that they serve. based
Yeah,
on a variety of
100%.
factors.
Yeah.
And that's why these races are so important.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all of that, especially, why your seat and why seats in Arizona are so critical, not only just locally, but state level, but really the ramifications nationally are ones that, as our PAC is supporting Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, some swing states and swing districts in Washington, because obviously I'm from here. So it's like one of those things where it's like, we are very intentionally targeting the races that we know will make a huge difference for the country and ultimately help, VP Harris get elected. So I just want to say thank you for running again, because I know how hard it is. And I know how hard it is to sign up to knowing what you're going to sign up for the next 2 years. And so we need more champions like you to stay there and to keep advocating for communities that have never had a voice before. It's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to go
So,
knock doors right after this.
yeah. Okay. Perfect. So as you know, our podcast is called Badass Women Doing Kick-Ass Shit. So I always like to ask our guests, what is your definition of badass?
Oh, my grandmother.
Mm.
My grandmother, Margarita Navarro, is my mom's mother. This woman was born in a boxcar in Kansas in 1925, the day after Christmas. Was the first daughter of 7 kids to my immigrant great-grandparents, Bartolo and Felisa Navarro. They came here from Guanajuato and DF in search of a better life. They would go on to become farm workers, going all up and down California before settling in San Jose. And my grandmother worked in the cannery. She, stocked shelves at midnight. She raised 6 kids by herself and fled domestic violence.
Wow.
And, she cleaned other people's houses. She was the hardest working person I ever met in my life.
Mm-hmm.
She's my biggest fan and champion. I miss her every day. And she is my definition of badass. She is the reason I'm here. Like, I stand on her 5-foot giant shoulders. She's
Love that.
I said the biggest giant I ever met was 5 feet tall. And that was
That's right. That's right. And I say that too. It's like we are all standing on the shoulders of past generations and other folks that have been doing the work and that are our inspirations to running and keeping going. And yeah, that's great. I love that story about your grandmother. That's amazing.
yeah.
Okay, so and you've answered this a little bit, but I'd love to hear, especially when I talk to legislators who have done it. I mean, we're definitely talking to candidates that have never been in the legislature
Mhm.
before, but the folks that I'm talking to that have done it before, how do you, or why do you care so much? Was there a specific incident that happened in your life, or like what propels you to keep going? That's what I talk about a lot, is like, it's that will to keep going. What is it for you?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm so lucky to come from a community with deep roots.
Mm-hmm.
My family, I talked about it a little bit, but my family has always, to my knowledge, fought for not just, their success as a family, but for the community.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear stories about my nana and tata. I knock my neighborhood and people remember them. They tell me
Mm-hmm.
stories. I never even got to meet my tata. He passed long before I was born, but they were just good people. They sat on community boards. There was a story someone stopped my dad and told him that the reason we even live in Mesa and my family, I was raised here is because, my dad and mom were trying to move to California and our car broke down in Mesa, Arizona. We had no money, no way to fix it. And someone said, you need to talk to Alberto Austin. And he said he was a little kid at the time, but he said this tall man came to their door and offered, an office space he had and said, you all can stay there as long as you want until you get back on your feet. And he was telling my dad that, my dad ended up finding a job in the area and we never left because your dad gave us a space to crash.
No way.
And
That's
yeah,
amazing.
and then my father too, in our community, he's been a civil rights attorney. He worked for the Attorney General's office for years, and he helped pass one of the first affordable housing laws here in the state.
Mm-hmm.
And he has helped so many people in our community. He still goes on Wednesdays sometimes to our local Paz de Cristo, which is an unhoused shelter for people, and gives free law advice. And so my mom's a former educator and was the person that would make quilts and we would pass them out during Christmas. And even if we didn't have anything, like my whole life has just been exemplified to me through service.
Yeah.
And so I do this because, that's what my family taught me to do. And also I want to honor them. I want to honor their legacy, not for any self-righteous purpose, but because I think I personally, like, I owe them that. Like, for my grandmother to be a farm worker and never have the opportunities that I did, never got to finish even high school or junior high. She quit so her other siblings could go, and she stayed working in the fields. I'm not wasting my opportunity to
Yep.
make a difference and impact for my community
Yeah.
because I get emotional. They sacrifice so much for me to be here, and I'm just not going to waste it. It's that important to me.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
really where the drive comes from. And it has to come from within. It has to come from a deep place of, like you said, service and sacrifice, because there is a lot about being a legislator that is sacrifice. And, thank you for doing it. I think, you are the absolute epitome of fifth generation Arizonan that is not wasting the opportunity that's been given to you. And I think it's incredibly powerful and inspiring. And that leads me to my next question, which is, what advice would you give the aspiring badass that is going to come behind you?
Yeah, I think, my path was so unique, right? And so all over the place. I think no matter what age you are, I think what would have been, helpful is don't, well, I knew this too, but don't decide to just care about your community now. Like,
Mhm.
start now, or when you run, right? You need to
Yep.
start that now.
Yeah.
And not just volunteering, at a local food bank once a year. Like, this is year round. And then
Yeah.
also, like, getting to know people in the community. The people who, run communities are not the city officials or people who work for the city. They're the people that have been organizing for so long, that they have been, working in underrepresented communities through their local nonprofits or organizations.
Yeah.
And those people are so critical because they're the ones on the ground. They've been on the ground. When COVID happened, I had some people reach out and I was on this call and they're well meaning, right? Well intentioned. Hey, we have these funds for people, but no one's coming to get them. I said, why would they? Communities like ours don't depend on someone to come save them, especially the government, because they don't come.
Yeah.
So they depend on one another and they have created their own networks and opportunities for community. And so I think for me, I try to be that bridge for them. To Now I get to be that bridge, right, to bring what I know, what I've learned back to them. So I would say, just get involved now. Start meeting people who you know or don't know. Go to events, local events that aren't just put on, by the big wigs.
Yeah.
Go to, and there's so many. Like, we have a local Vietnamese event coming up here, the festivals, things like that. Talk to your local organizations. Those are the ones, even your local faith leaders. We have a really great faith community comprised of all different faiths, and I work with them because they too are subsidizing the support that the
Mhm.
state's not giving, and it should.
Right.
The state should give more,
Yeah.
but that falls on the backs of our local organizations and faith networks sometimes. And so I think just really, you have to know your community that you're serving, and if you don't, you have no business running for office, because your reason for being there is to help the collective community, not the one that's just been in status quo power the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much for saying that. I think it's so important, especially for young folks, to get involved as they can. And like you said, if you know you're going to run for office someday, or you want to, you can't just decide to show up one day. You have to really get more into the community and really understand. I think part of what representing community means is understanding the needs of the actual community that you're serving. And for me, there were 148 languages spoken in my school district. And so for me to have that experience of being bilingual and being an immigrant and being someone who understood what that was like to come home and translate for your parents, it
Mhm.
was powerful to show up at
Yeah.
the legislature with that lived experience. And that is exactly what you're talking about, Lorena. And I love the way you put it, because it makes it very clear, it makes it very accessible, and it makes it doable for the next person. And really, it's just about caring. right? It's just
Yeah.
about deeply caring.
Of course. I think that is why I was probably successful, because I hadn't just decided to love my community. I had already been doing those things. So
Yeah.
people, I'm not saying that, oh, everyone knew who I was, but I think people were familiar with me to some extent, right? I've been
Yeah.
working in our community college. I had known some of these young students and families. It's a close knit community. I'd been volunteering prior to deciding to run for office. Like that was
Yeah.
just something that was in my everyday life. And so I do think that was helpful. I mean, if you're just visible in the community naturally, people remember.
Yes,
And
that's
so it's
right.
important.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you so much. We'd love to close with, what are you looking forward to? Do you have, how can people support you and the work that you're doing? And tell us a little bit more about how we can make sure you go back to the legislature.
Absolutely. We need any and all help. That I mean, this is a grassroots campaign. I don't take money from corporate PACs, anything like that. Last time, the average donation was $24. So you can go to lorenaustin.com. We still need money to help run ads. I'm trying to run a Spanish language ad in our
Oh,
community, but
great.
I need more money to do that. Literature, helping, fund some of our staff who work so hard.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't be able to do this without them. But we're in that critical moment right now. Like, this is it. This is the final push. If you're waiting to donate, please don't wait any longer. It's right
That's right.
now. It's critical. This is it. This is it. There is no waiting till November 3rd is too late for us.
That's
Right now. So I think that the urgency is here. And yes, supporting, our other federal candidates, presidential candidates is important, but the state legislature gets often overlooked, but it is the most
Yep.
important races, because we are the ones that are going to decide what happens with your reproductive health care, what happens with your public education, with your transportation, the freeways that you drive every single day, the air that you breathe. I mean, a lot of that is at the state level. It is.
Mhm.
And so please pay attention to us and help us any way you can.
All politics is local, and you are
Yes.
such a representative of true democracy, true grit, true passion, and compassion. Thank you so much for being on our podcast. Thank you for being such a badass that we can look up to and support. You're awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mona. I mean, the world. Thank you so much for having me on here. And I continue to look forward to seeing other badass women and people enter politics. Can't wait.